So Chris Castro is a longtime friend of our League of Women Voters of Florida. He's been a clean energy, sustainability, resilience professional and businessman. He's presented for us on our monthly clean energy Zooms before, going way back, before I was involved in them. He always brings a fresh insight and ideas, and he has an abundance of wonderful, contagious energy, and that's what I love about Chris. He has an amazing approach to sustainability, which has evolved over time. And he has been involved as an entrepreneur and running nonprofits to policy and government work. And now he is focusing on financial solutions. He has always been committed to making a positive impact on our environment and our communities. Chris currently serves as the founding director and executive vice president and chief sustainability officer at Climate First Bank. And now that is the nation's first FDIC insured digital community bank, and it specializes in climate and clean energy finance. Prior to that, Chris was tapped as a presidential appointee for the Biden-Harris administration, and he was at the U.S. Department of Energy. He served as chief of staff for state and community energy programs, and he helped manage a multi-billion-dollar portfolio of grants and technical assistance programs that catalyzed clean energy projects all across the country. Chris's career also includes nearly a decade of service as a public official, and that's how I remember Chris when I first got involved with this, in the city of Orlando, where he held various roles, including senior advisor to Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer and director of sustainability and resilience, which is also called Green Works Orlando, and they have a wonderful website. You should explore it. He is also the co-founder of several well-known environmental nonprofit organizations, including Ideas for Us, Fleet Farming, and an early member that helped launch Florida's Solar United Neighbors, which we kind of referred to in the beginning of the call. So Chris tonight is going to talk about the little background here. Last year was a historic year for the solar industry, but the new administration has introduced significant uncertainty. So there's policy, economic, and supply chain factors in flux. And Chris will provide some insights on the successes over the last 4 years and current national clean energy trends. Plus, he will highlight new challenges and opportunities to ensure the continued growth of the solar industry in the Florida market and across the U.S. So the title of his talk this evening is New Horizons, How to Maintain Momentum of the Solar Industry in Florida and Beyond. And here is Chris.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Maxine and Karen and Mary. I was delighted to get your invitation to come back. I'm a huge fan of the League of Women Voters and just want to, first of all, thank you all for joining me tonight, but for the work that you all have been doing and continue to do to advance this specific mission, right, around clean energy and climate, but also broadly what the League does to protect democracy and really protect our rights. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm actually going to be repurposing this presentation from a keynote that I just gave last week at the Florida Solar and Storage Summit. And for those who aren't aware, we have the Florida Solar Energy Industries Association, also known as FLASIA. And it's really the industry association of all the contractors and finance providers and the like across the state of Florida. And so I was really delighted to be in Tampa last week to share some of these insights. Again, and you heard a great background on me, but for those who I haven't met, my name is Chris Castro, and it's a delight to be here with you. As you heard, the better part of the last 20 years, I've been dedicating every waking moment to advancing sustainability and climate and clean energy solutions across the state of Florida, across the country, and actually through different engagements internationally as well. And so I bring to the table this experience that spans nonprofit and government policy experience and academic, as well as the private sector experience. And funny enough, I was as I was engaging people at the FLASIA Summit, I would get people who would run up to me and engage and just remembered me from my different positions over the many years, right? Some of them are like, I remember when you were a student at UCF leading Ideas for Us and doing all the great work there. And I remember you were, at the Florida Solar Energy Center, and that's when I met you. And I was the chairman for FSEC, really trying to think about how do we use this institution to advance clean energy, right? And then, of course, my work in Orlando and in DOE and now at Climate First. So really excited to be here. And again, my presentation really wants to start out talking about the progress of the last 4 years. I think many of us and people who I've engaged over the last 100+ days or so are in some stage of the 5 stages of grief, and we're still kind of coming to the realization of what's happening. And I think in order to get past that, we have to actually reflect and celebrate what collectively we have done to get to this point. And so I'll share a lot of insights into that. Of course, we have market challenges ahead. I'd be tone deaf to speak about maintaining momentum and not really addressing some of the looming issues that we're facing in the market. But to me, and for those who know me, I'm a very much an eternal optimist. I truly believe that there's incredible opportunities ahead of us, even despite the uncertainties in the market, to maintain the momentum towards our collective mission of powering this country and the world with carbon-free, clean energy solutions. So I think that a lot of the rapid growth that we've been seeing in the clean energy space, I think it's important to realize that it is not accidental. It is a result of very smart public policy, of historic federal investment, of private sector innovation that all has been coming together to kind of create this momentum around cleaner, more affordable, more resilient energy systems. And this has been going on really over the last two decades of significant momentum, right? I've had the privilege, as you've heard, of being on both sides of this progress at the US Department of Energy, where I helped to deploy a bunch of money, over $11 billion by the time I was terminated on January 20th, went out the door from my office alone, 28 different grant programs, all focused on getting states, tribes, local governments, school districts, universities, small businesses to all implement clean energy solutions. So I've seen it on that side. And now, as the executive vice president of Climate First Bank, this mission-driven financial institution that's trying to scale equitable solar and storage across the country, it's fascinating to kind of get both of these angles. And it was really during the tenure throughout my roles in the clean energy space that I've really learned one thing, and that is this transition is unavoidable. It's apparent, it is undeniable, and clean energy is here to stay, right? It's growing very, very fast. And I know that 2024 and some of this progress seems like a decade ago, but it's important. What you see here is the trifecta of what we called in the Investing in America agenda. It was quite frankly the most meaningful investment in an industrial economic strategy for the country that centered equitable clean energy transition at its core, right? And of course we all know that in November of 2021, that's when the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill, was passed, and that was the first big step forward in the last administration. And the focus of the bill was enabling a ton of funding for infrastructure, which presidents had been talking about literally for decades to do, and eventually was able to happen, to start investing in climate resilient infrastructure, to put workers and focus on good paying jobs as we built this infrastructure, and to take clean energy from the fringes into the mainstream, right? Building supply chains and the like. And that was the big first step. The second step was the Chips and Science Act, right? That was summer of 2022. And this was really the strategy to provide an incentive to onshore the supply chains and the manufacturing of semiconductors and chips, which we all know are in every major technology that we depend on to make this transition happen, right? EVs, the solar inverters, wind turbine parts, you name it, right? Heat pumps, they all require semiconductors. And we can't expect to lead this charge if we're not domestically dependent on our own supply. So that's a key fault that we have as this country. And part of the Chips and Science Act was to begin this process of onshoring and boosting domestic manufacturing. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act was the third major hit, and that happened in the fall of 2022. And this really was about incentivizing individuals and businesses with tax credits and rebates so that they were incentivized to drive the clean energy investments that we needed forward, right? So you had this infrastructure funding, you had this incentive for manufacturing and supply chains, and then you had the incentives for the individuals and the businesses to essentially make clean energy on sale for the next decade. That's what the IRA does, right? And to align it with a focus on environmental justice and trying to support those that are in highest energy burden or are being impacted by legacy energy technologies today, right? To make sure that they can benefit first and foremost. And so this was really the reason why I got plucked out of the city of Orlando in the mayor's office and came up to the Washington, D.C. to establish myself here. And for many respects, people are saying, well, we were there, right? We did have these three, but I do want to remind you all that these were laws that were passed, and yes, some of them are being potentially, broken apart with the upcoming bill. But for the most part, these are laws that take a real act of Congress to fully rescind. And it's important to note that 80% of the money of the at DOE and across the federal family, 80% of the bill and IRA money that we received and chips actually was obligated and deployed by January 20th of this year by the transition to the new administration. So we hear a lot of noise about clawbacks of money, and that's really some very popular grant programs like the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and the like, which I could talk about. But you got to realize that there's a tremendous amount of money at the states, at the local governments, at the tribes, and in businesses that over this year and the coming years are going to go to work. And so as a result, January 20th of 2025, we saw a couple of really important, you know, truths and facts in the market. One, the private sector investment into clean energy is sending a very clear signal that clean energy is here to stay. 2024 saw a doubling of the amount of investment that went into clean energy versus fossil fuel spending and infrastructure. You're talking about $500 billion in clean energy technologies and infrastructure just in 2024. And for every dollar that the government invested, there was $6 in private sector investment that went in to making these projects a reality. And this is the fact of the matter. You're starting to see a reduction in investing in fossil fuel infrastructure and a significant gain on the clean energy side, right? What that meant was that we saw clean energy grow relentlessly year over year and continue to see that, right? This is a chart that's showing 2024 cumulative electricity generation capacity additions in the United States, new power that came online to the United States, right? We added 30 Hoover dams worth of clean energy, over 60 gigawatts of power, right? And when you look at, when you actually look at the investment, more than double clean energy that in terms of gigawatts that we added last year than we had in any prior year. And that also, and so here's a map that's kind of showing you across the country where are these big power plants, and it's everything from the Vogel plant, the nuclear plant that came online finally in 2024 after like a decade plus of being developed, even the Vineyard Wind project. Most people don't hear about or talk about, but big wind projects came online as well. So, and what that meant was that 96% of the new electricity that we interconnected in 2024 was carbon free. Here on this chart, what I really look at are the dark purple, which is really our solar, and the teal color, which is your natural gas. And look at the differences just over the last 14, 15 years of how the focus of the energy industry has invested, right, year over year, and the additions of this new power generation coming online. 2024, staggering, 67% was solar. When you added wind to it, right, and batteries, and you added geothermal, and it ended up being 96% of new power. And you're probably asking yourself, well, yeah, that was 2024, we had all these incentives. What about now during this Trump administration? Well, EIA, based on the permit data and all the interconnection queues, shows that 93% of new electricity in 2025 will be carbon free, vast majority of that being solar and storage, right? And this is a trend that is not going to slow down no matter who is in office. This is the ship has left, right, the docks, and ultimately this is now the marketplace realizing that clean energy is the cheapest, the fastest to build, the best source of energy technologies that could be decentralized, that could actually be developed at the site of need, that can mitigate a bunch of transmission and distribution investments that are needed. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of benefits, and as a result, the market is proving out to be what it is, right? Now, I talked about the Chips and Science Act, and even in the bill, there was a tremendous amount of money to invest in domestic manufacturing. Just in the solar supply chain, this is just solar and manufacturing. We've seen 176 solar manufacturing factories being built in the United States since the beginning of the Biden administration. We're talking about $1 trillion of private sector investment, and when we're looking at our domestic capacity this year, we might even be able to meet the vast majority, over 80% of our needs in the United States. Solar potential demand will be met by U.S. domestic manufacturing. Now, again, a lot of the raw material is coming still overseas, and we're needing to assemble here and create the actual cells and assembly and the panels here. And over time, right, we're going to start to see those supply chains, which take time, see those onshore into the United States. And that was the whole idea behind these tax credits and the work that they're doing. Um, of course, what many of us care about is how does all of this investment actually yield improvement of the quality of life of the people who I love and my community. And the fact of the matter is that clean energy is one of the fastest growing industries of the country, period. The US Energy and Environmental Report, we call it the USER report, is a great resource. By the way, it was published last year for the most recent update, has a great update of kind of the stats nationwide, state by state, as to the growth of clean energy. And we saw that clean energy grew 2 times the average of any industry across the entire economy in the United States. We saw that women and people of color had the highest growth. Hispanics actually had literally the highest growth in terms of employment in the clean energy space. And now we've seen over 400,000 new clean energy jobs created since the passage of the IRA, right? It's not even 3 years old. This is 2.5 years old, and we're talking about net new 400,000 jobs across this country. It's been a real, you know, catalyzing of this industry. And and all that said is Florida, back to the league here, right? Florida continues to be a leading market for clean energy. And I think a lot, in large part, because of the incredible advocacy of this organization, the work that you've done to partner with groups like Florida Solar United Neighbors to kind of kickstart this across the leagues and get your members to sign up. And now there's literally tens of millions of dollars of solar invested in the state because of it. I mean, it's amazing. But look at this. Florida ranks third in the country for solar energy adoption. Okay. Rooftop solar installations the last 5 years has increased 1,000%. 1,000% in 5 years. That's in large part because of these co-ops and the work that's happening statewide, right? Energy storage is becoming the next wave of clean energy in many markets. Energy storage is becoming more important than actually solar. It's becoming the first leader for a lot of investors, for a lot of homeowners. And right now, we're fourth in the United States for actual capacity installed in the state. Tremendous growth, and we're seeing a lot of utilities. That photo there in the middle is OUC installing a major utility scale battery system at their substation. This, of course, helps with voltage and frequency regulation. And as we're bringing on new variable resources like solar, right? The storage helps to provide clean lines of electricity into the grid and make sure that we mitigate any of those challenges, right? So very important. Electric vehicles, second in the country, which I think is tremendous, and third regarding EV charging infrastructure. This was a big priority for Mayor Dyer when I was in Orlando. He wanted to be one of the EV ready cities of the country, and in large part we have become that because of a lot of the investment that the city has made, but also just in general what we're seeing in terms of the overall infrastructure that's being deployed, public and private, to support electric vehicle adoption. So incredible to note that although we have a very challenging regulatory environment, we don't allow third party sale, we have relatively low cost of power, making the economics of these investments a little bit more challenging than other parts. Even with all of those things going against us, Florida still is leading the pack, and I think just shows how resilient the state is in terms of the changes in the market. Now, yes, we have real challenges that we are faced, unlike we've seen in a very long time, right? We have an about face, essentially, of the federal government's priorities and policies around clean energy. And of course, that's really concerning. But I will say that, again, energy is based on price. Energy is something that at the end of the day is going to be driven um, uh, based on whether it's cheapest, fastest, and best to install. And today, clean energy is that solution in large part, both at the utility scale level and community scale level. So we have a couple of things here. We have political and legislative uncertainty. We have a huge, big, beautiful bill that is currently going through the House and the Senate, and we don't know what that's going to do as it relates to the tax credits. Is it going to roll back the ITC, right? The investment tax credit, which is that 30%. They potentially the current House bill says it's going to slash at the end of this year, and then commercial incentives, right, will scale down over the next 3 years or so. Will the net metering the state net metering retail rate net metering law be last much longer, right? We saw a few years ago that was certainly something the utilities pushed through, and because of a lot of the noise that Sun and League of Women Voters and Sierra Club and Ideas and many others did, and Flacia, of course, the governor vetoed that bill, if you remember, right? That was a big change up. But will that happen again? And of course, with FPL pushing this new bill through, this new rate hike, this could very much upend some of the local state uncertainty around certainty around NEM. So there's a lot there to think through. Tariffs and the supply chain. There's a big question mark. What I've been talking to a number of manufacturers, solar manufacturers, and developers is that many of them, knowing this was coming, have actually purchased a significant amount of supply and are warehousing a lot of supply. A lot of the bigger installers, medium and large installers are basically storing a lot of stock of supply so that they're not as hit with these tariffs and things start to shake out over time. Because right now the big question mark is just how real is the tariff of the day, and will it change in a matter of a couple of weeks based on a conversation? These are all very legitimate questions that the industry is still reeling about, right? And across the board, workforce development continues to be a challenge, right? Qualified, skilled labor in this industry, and not just solar, but broader home electrification, right? The heat pumps and heat pump water heaters are becoming a major clean energy solution. We need to push right through all of our channels, and there's a real gap in people in companies that are certified and in actual contractors that know what they're doing in this respect. And so I just wanted to underscore the Florida Solar Apprenticeship Program, because this was a great idea that FSEC had to say, hey, why don't we, really start incubating an apprenticeship program for the solar industry here, born in the state of Florida, that got approved at the state level, and now there are many contractors going through, and incubating new apprenticeships in this space. So certainly want to underscore that. So this brings me to the part of the kind of presentation where I'm pivoting into kind of the opportunities ahead, right? And I still remember vividly being trained by Al Gore for his climate reality project back in 2015 in Miami. And halfway through his big presentation, he put up this slide similar to this that had the two Sino characters for the Japanese word of crisis. And he talked about how many in many respects, right, the climate is seen as a crisis situation, that the current political environment is seen as a crisis situation for our industry and for our movement. But he underscored the fact that the Japanese culture really looks at this in two very important ways. And one is the danger of inaction, of continuing down this path as status quo, but the unbelievable opportunity that we have to shape ourselves in a better direction, right? And it always reminds me of any time we're faced with adversity, we have a crisis ahead of us, that it is our opportunity to evolve with it, and to leverage what's ahead of us to continue the momentum. And this is where, when I've been looking at the industry, here are a couple of things that I'm seeing we have a real potential to continue. One is the mush market, what's often known as the not-for-profit real estate community. Now that direct pay is open, and that is looking to maintain, even in this new bill, that is an area that I think we can do a big push on, especially over the course of the next year. Small commercial PV, I'll talk about how we're improving that, and that being a really big market. Of course, low and moderate income communities and the Florida Solar for All funding that's coming down the pike. How might we be able to support self? And of course, Sun's already part of that, to really supercharge that opportunity. Of course, solar and storage as a resilience measure in the state of Florida being very, very critical. And then just thinking through ethical and affordable financing, right? That we're offering here at Climate First. So first and foremost, nonprofit entities. If you're not aware, the Inflation Reduction Act enabled a massive gain for not for profits to benefit from clean energy investments. Everything from rooftop solar and storage to changing your fleets to electric. All of these investments actually provides not for profits the ability of getting a rebate check from the Department of Treasury, similar to how a private individual or business can get a tax credit from the same types of investments. Game changer, of course. It brings a whole new marketplace into light. And as an example, Climate First recently financed 100% solar and storage for a church in Georgia. And the beautiful thing about the product is that the 30% tax credit that they're getting, right, that direct pay rebate check, is not something that is required to be rolled into our loan. And that church now has, a pretty significant, amount of funding that they can put to their mission, they can put to their operations, and at the same time lower their power bill by going solar and storage, right? They've also made their church more of a resilience type hub for their community. And so they have a number of services that they provide in times of disaster and outage. And so I think that there's going to be a massive player. Of course, the city of Orlando has been investing a tremendous amount of rooftop solar on fire stations and police stations and other buildings. Local governments, right, can benefit from this, and they're more so looking at ways to reduce operating expenses and achieve their mission around clean energy. So I think that this is an area of focus. Small commercial, right? One of the challenges with the commercial solar market is that when you underwrite from a bank's perspective, from a finance perspective, when you underwrite a commercial loan, you not only are underwriting based on the business financials, but you're also underwriting based on the personal financials, right? And often for small businesses, the business financials aren't as kept as well. They might run an incredible business and do extremely well, but their books might not be as tight, or they might have prolonged their tax returns. And if now they've extended their tax return and you don't have 2 years of it, the project is essentially on hold and won't move forward. And the vast majority of commercial projects run into this issue. So at Climate First Bank, one thing that we just turned on is the streamlining of commercial solar loans up to $350,000, and being able to finance that the same exact way as we finance residential solar, meaning that it's only the financials of the owners of that business. Anybody that's 20% owner of a business or more would provide the financials, and we as a bank would underwrite based on the personal guarantees, not the business guarantee. This is a big change up, and it will greatly streamline and open up a market for residential installers. Most residential installers stay in their lane of residential. Why? Because the underwriting procedure is just PG, is just personal guarantee of the owner, right, of that homeowner, versus needing to get a whole bunch of other figures. So now we're trying to kind of find the small commercial market and help churches and retail and some restaurants and others to really streamline that. So I think small commercial is going to be an interesting space, and it would be fascinating to almost do a cooperative focused on churches and small commercial properties, and through the economy of scale model, right, through the Sun model, really trying to drive down the price point. For us at Climate First Bank, it's not just enough to finance clean energy, but we also want to begin addressing the energy justice issues faced by low and moderate income households. Right now, across the United States, one third, so 33% of our loans are already supporting low and moderate income households across the country. Our goal is to increase that significantly. And in order for us to do that, we've been trying to find partners that have trusted relationships with these communities, that have a unique multicultural marketing experience that helps them understand the benefits, but also navigate the incentives, federal, state, local. How do we simplify that for people? And we came across this company called Homey Technologies. Started in Florida. They're just a couple of months old. They're launching, but they raised a bunch of capital to launch this effort to really drive clean energy in low and moderate income households across the state of Florida and eventually nationwide. And the cool thing is that they're working with an installer network. That they've onboarded as well. And they're using our fintech, our technology, to help them in the field to process and finance this. Now, $156 million has been appropriated to the state of Florida and has been allocated to Self and Sun and the Nature Conservancy through the Florida Solar for All Coalition, as you know. And those funds are currently in the design and how they're going to be rolled out. But the idea is that in partnership with Homey, we can begin to identify the households that can benefit the most from the federal incentive, and also finance the other homes that don't need the federal incentive to make the economics work, right? To have people save from day one. So we're excited to work with Homey to continue to increase the amount of low and moderate income households that can actually benefit from clean energy. And I want you to stay tuned, because I think we're going to see a lot more from them. There might even be a great synergy with our Sun cooperatives, and whether they can help us get the word out. Um, Down in Miami, we just financed a commercial. This is an example of a commercial solar project right in line of that 350K threshold. This is an 87 kilowatt solar and 4 Powerwall system backup. It's the Miami Climate and Innovation Center in Little Haiti. And the cool thing is we were very excited about financing this because it's not just an event space and a museum. They also have co-working for kind of mission aligned businesses and orgs, but it is a resilience hub for the Little Haiti community. And anytime there's a grid outage or a major storm or hurricane that comes through, this facility turns on and provides resources, whether it's sand, water, ice, food, hubs to charge your electronics. And now, with it being solar and storage, it's disconnectable from the grid and it can operate on its own for several days. So we're excited. This is the type of an approach, right, of resiliency and using solar and storage as a real solution to ensure energy resilience in times of outage, which we know is inevitable moving forward. So in the last remaining few minutes here, I wanted to just touch on climate first actually also being a real solution for us to really think about. And for those who aren't aware, this bank was started here in the state of Florida, June 1st, 2021. So we're about to be 4 years old here in just a couple of weeks. And basically the bank is not only the world's first FDIC insured and B Corp certified bank that's focused on combating the climate crisis, but our big value proposition is that we're vertically integrated with a fintech company, a financial technology company that's focused on accelerating clean energy loans. To give you a little snapshot, the bank doesn't just invest in clean energy with our deposits, but it's a wide range of values based investments, mission aligned projects from affordable housing to worker owned cooperatives. We have a whole loan product that takes private business and moves them to worker owned cooperatives. Of course, you're seeing residential and commercial solar being a significant piece of our impact wedge because of the technology and the like. But it's important to note that as a B Corp and as a mission aligned bank, our goal is to use our collective deposits as a force for good and solve many problems in the community, climate of course being the center lens and one of those. And of course clean energy, specializing in clean energy loans is really how we're able to truly activate this mission space. Right now Climate First Bank, as of June of last year, so about a year ago, FDIC and the Federal Reserve approved Climate First Bank to be a national chartered bank. What that means is we now have depositors in all 50 states, individuals and businesses in Fairbanks, Alaska, and Hawaii, Puerto Rico, everywhere in between. We have actual people who are banking with us. And then we're licensed and able to do solar loans in all 50 states. And the innovation behind Climate First is that we've created a mortgage style clean energy loan. It's a 100% finance product, no money down from the homeowner, right? It's a 30-year term for residential at a low fixed interest, and there's no hidden fees like these dealer fees that a lot of solar financing requires, which increases the price of the solar project cost substantially, sometimes up to 30+%. Um, and so this product, 30-year, 799, 100% finance product, is now across all 50 states available. And in certain markets, I've been partnering with green banks like the Montgomery County Green Bank, and we're talking to the state Solar for All recipients, and we're creating loan products based on this that essentially is even more affordable. We have a 499 fixed loan for 30 years for people in certain markets because the green banks are buying the interest rate down, or they're creating a forgivable loan or a rebate for these solar arrays, which is just making solar so much more affordable in pencil, right? So it's really exciting. Here's a little bit of our consumer solar market expansion. You can see a heat map of where we're seeing the adoption. Right now, we have solar financed in 30 states out of the 50, and now that we're licensed across the country, we're going to start seeing a lot more. And this is a real focus on Florida and Florida's residential consumer solar loans and where the heat map is. And of course, as you can see, the I-4 corridor is lit up. That's where we have most of our branches and our presence. But South Florida and even the Panhandle is starting to really pick up. That list there is of the major, installers that are using our financing. PES Solar, West Bay, right? Solar Source is a big one out of the Tampa Bay area, right? And others. So that gives you a little heat map there. And this is a snapshot of where we are today since May of 2022. Okay, so 3 years since launching our solar loan product, we've done $193 million financed, over 4,000 loans. The vast majority, of course, being in the state of Florida, because it was only until June of last year where we were able to start licensing and lending outside of the state. And so just amazing to kind of see the growth. This is truly staggering. When you look at any other bank or even fintech in this space, unrivaled in terms of its growth. And it's because, again, we're vertically integrated. Not only do we have the technology that's empowering the contractors, but as an FDIC insured bank, we have the lowest cost of private capital, which is deposits. And so many of these solar finance are backed by private equity. They require higher yields, much higher cost of capital, and therefore there's a bunch of these fees. And that's why Climate First is so well positioned. So that really leads me to my conclusion on a couple of points. One is clean energy is irresistible and it's unstoppable. Despite a lot of the noise in the airwaves, I hope that you take away that we've made incredible progress, that there's a lot of momentum in onshoring manufacturing and supply chains, that there's a lot going on to enable new types of financing that ultimately will continue this momentum, even if we see the ITC rolled back by the end of this year. Okay, that is not the end of the world. Number two, the mush market, right? These not-for-profits can now benefit from clean energy tax incentives. Let's do everything we can in the coming days and weeks to protect it and use them as much as we can, right? Especially elective pay. This seems to not be so controversial in the current bill, but you never know how things change, right, in the Senate. So stay tuned and let's protect it. Solar commercial PV, especially small commercial PV, is becoming a bigger wedge in the solar market. And so I think it could be something for us to focus in on. And we're doing our part to streamline the underwriting like residential. So now these residential contractors can open up the marketing wedge that they have and start to address some of these smaller commercial businesses, because now it's the same process as selling a residential deal, right? Same exact process. LMI communities and the Solar for All, I think that this is a big deal, and I look forward to hearing from Self, right? Self, the Solar Energy Loan Fund, is managing that and is designing how they want to roll out those dollars. And so it would be a good opportunity, Maxine and team, to invite Dwan or David or somebody from the Self team to present on what their design looks like for the Solar for All program and how to benefit from the infrastructure that this organization has built with sun across the state, right? Um, Solar and storage, let's continue to push that. We're seeing about over 50% now of new solar is being coupled with battery storage. Storage is a big deal because it helps provide more capacity for the grid, and utilities love it, right? That's why you're starting to see a lot of utilities roll back net metering laws like OUC, but still ramp up a storage incentive, right? There's a whole rebate for energy storage. And when you look at the economics, it actually ends up being really interesting. Much more now with the economics of where storage has gone and of course with the tax credit. And lastly, we have ethical and affordable financing available today that makes economic sense without government incentives. Our 30-year clean energy loan product does not take into account the 30% tax credit. It's not part of our pro forma or payback period. Somebody who gets that tax credit can pay credit card debt. We say take your family on a vacation. If you want to roll it into the loan, we will re-amortize and drop your payments, but your payments will never go up from the day you sign. And that's the whole idea around providing more ethical approaches to financing these projects. So thank you all for listening through, and let's keep up the momentum. Thank you to the league.
Wow, thank you, Chris. That was dynamite.